Hello and welcome to this next lecture in the series from our English 102 class. Today we're going to be talking about advertising and identifying our audience, basically looking at how rhetorical elements can tell us who is being manipulated and how. First of all, advertising is a big bucks industry. According to Forbes magazine, advertisers have spent $72.09 billion with a B on U.S. digital advertising last year. That's just digital advertising, while TV spending accounts for $71 billion. So a lot of money is being funneled into advertising campaigns. Not only is money being funneled into the industry, but a lot of people are employed in this industry. Over 500,000 people were employed in advertising industries in the U.S. last year. So why spend so much and invest so much capital in advertising? A profitable ad is an effective one. So the best way to build sales and profits is by reaching the right target audience. And so advertisers and marketing people spend a lot of money honing in on the perfect audience for their advertisements. So in other words, small business owners must make sure their advertising reaches the people who are most likely to purchase their products, people in their community. So for our upcoming essay project, we're going to be looking at community-based advertisements. Today with this PowerPoint, we're going to get some practice with national ads, but for the assignment, you're tasked with finding a local advertisement from a local business that you can analyze to see how it's reaching a specific part of your community. So audience awareness is one of the crucial aspects of effective writing in the academic setting. So when we talk to someone face-to-face, we always know who we're talking to. It's easy to tell. When we're writing to an audience or creating an advertisement for an audience, sometimes it's a little bit more difficult to identify who that audience is going to be. And it's important to identify who that audience is because we automatically adjust our speech to connect with the people we're talking to. For instance, I have a 9-month-old baby. I speak very differently to her than I do to my students and than I do to fellow colleagues, and of course differently than I speak to my boss. When we talk to college professors, we use longer sentences and more formal language, as opposed to when we talk to 3-year-olds, we shorten sentences and use very simple words. In short, we change what we say because we know who our audience is and we know how to connect with them. So in order to understand who the audience of a text is, we can ask ourselves the following questions. First of all, the very basic question, who are they? And when we ask this question, we want to break down that audience as specifically as possible into demographic information. So we want to look at the age of the audience being targeted. We want to look at the sex or gender of the audience, their educational levels. Do they need a certain level of education to be able to understand the ad that's coming their way? Economic status. Is this ad appealing to a lower class family, a middle class family, or an upper class family? Do economics come into selling this product? We also want to look at a little deeper identity ideas for this audience. What are some of their political leanings, perhaps, their social leanings, or their religious beliefs? How might these things color the way that a person perceives an advertisement, as well as the product that's being sold to them? We also want to look at what level of information the advertisement is communicating and what level of information the audience needs to have in order to understand what's being sold. A lay audience is another word for just a general audience. This is a general group of people. If you looked around the room and grabbed 5 people out of that group, it would be a lay audience, just general, regular, everyday people. A managerial audience needs a higher level of information. Picture these as people who are making purchasing decisions. So if a manager was required to decide what brand of laptop computer to buy everyone in the office, they would want more specific information in the advertisement that would convince them to buy a Dell computer over an HP or something along those lines. So if we're looking at a managerial level of information required, we're going to have more data points, more statistics, more technical information. And finally, if you're working with an expert level of information, this is highly technical information and jargon that's going to appear in the ad that's going to appeal to an expert audience. So if you were purchasing a computer product, this is where they would talk about all the pieces that create that computer, how those pieces are better than pieces from another one, with a lot of data, points, and statistics. And after we've identified who our audience is and what level of information they're looking for, we can look at the context in which the ad will be viewed. Did we find it in a newspaper or a magazine, perhaps a billboard or a poster, or somewhere on the internet? The context tells us a lot about who the audience is. If it's an ad placed on a billboard going over a bridge and is advertising boats, you might find an audience that has enough money to own a car, so they might also have enough money to own a boat. They're driving, so they feel comfortable working with heavy machinery like cars and boats. So it can tell us a lot about a particular audience when we look at the context in which the ad is found. After we've gone through those steps, we can categorize the audience. This slide covers just additional information when we talk about the 3 categories of audience in the lay audience, managerial, and experts. So if you need to unpack those categories a little bit more, take a moment to read through this slide. We're looking at the lay audience, which is just a general audience with no specific or expert knowledge. A managerial audience has a little bit more knowledge and needs more information to make an informed decision. And the experts are the most demanding audience. They understand a lot more about the product being sold to them, and so they need more specific information in order to buy into that product. The frame of reference is also an important aspect of identifying an audience. A frame of reference is a complex set of assumptions and attitudes which we use to filter perceptions to create meaning. So this frame can include beliefs, schemas, preferences, values, culture, and other ways in which we bias our understanding and judgment. Identifying the audience helps establish the frame of reference used to manipulate them. An advertiser must not only identify the audience, but also identify how they think in terms of their frame of reference. So when you think frame of reference, think what is the ideal person to buy this product that's being sold. If we're selling a value-sized package of baby diapers, that ideal audience might be young parents who might be struggling economically and need to buy a whole bunch of diapers in order to get their child taken care of. An ideal audience for that probably wouldn't include middle-aged single men who enjoy a good malt scotch, right? So we want to think about who that ideal audience is, identify some of the things that they might care about or be interested in order to fully contextualize that frame of reference. And of course, rhetoric comes into play when we're looking at advertisements. So we want to review our rhetoric real quick from our last essay. If we remember back a couple weeks ago, ethos is the perceived credibility of the speaker. That's how credibility is established in the ad. Oftentimes this is done through the use of a logo or a website or other information that says this is a credible thing that's being sold to you. Other people have agreed that this is a good product, and so you should also buy it. Oftentimes, credibility can be built by using a famous person to sell a product, or using a famous song in the background of an advertisement. Pathos is the emotional appeal to the audience. We want to use just a little bit of pathos to be effective. Too much pathos and we come off as a little crazy. So pathos is when we tug on those emotions, and those can be positive or negative emotions. And logos is the logical appeal or logical connections made in the text. This is anytime we see data points, we see statistics, we see clear cause and effect logical connections. That's when we would categorize that as logos. And a new aspect of rhetoric for us is kairos, and this is the timeliness of the text. So kairos asks, is this the right moment for this ad to appear? If we saw an ad for the Super Bowl come on TV right now, we would think that somebody had made a mistake. The Super Bowl has passed. We're done with that. We're going to have to wait a couple more months for the Super Bowl to come back. So if somebody's advertising that we should buy Doritos in order to get ready for our Super Bowl party, that wouldn't be a very timely advertisement. So kairos says, is this the right moment for this text to have its maximum persuasive appeal? So a couple years ago, if you think back, the Zika virus was a big thing people were worried about. And so a lot of products that were claiming to keep mosquitoes away were very popular because that's, of course, how Zika was being spread. So an advertisement for a Zika virus vaccine at the height of the Zika scare demonstrates kairos. Everyone's going to want to go out and buy that. But if you saw an advertisement relating to Zika now, you would kind of scratch your head and say, oh, I think I remember a couple years ago when that was a thing, but it's certainly not anything you're going to feel compelled to go out and buy right now. So you have to have an ad that's appropriate to the time in which we see it. And after we've identified the audience, the next step in order to successfully look at how advertisements manipulate an audience is to look at the purpose. Two things are always sold in an ad, a literal object and a figurative message. So the literal object is easy to identify. It's Pepsi that they want you to buy, or perhaps a Kit Kat bar, or maybe a new pair of Nike sneakers. But the figurative message is a little harder and often relates to ideals, identity, dreams, and ambitions. Yes, you can buy Nike shoes, the literal object, but figuratively they're also selling you this ideal of a fit, athletic person. So if you buy the Nike shoes, perhaps you also can have a perfect body and run a marathon and be unstoppable. So the figurative message is the ideal or the dream or the identity that's being sold you, as opposed to just the physical product that you take home from the store with you. So in the following examples, in order to hone our skills, we want to take a look at the advertisements in front of you, look at identifying who the audience is, use that demographic information. We want to look at the level of information they have about the subject. We want to look at the context in which that subject's being found. After we've done those three things, then we want to look at the frame of reference. Who's the perfect person that this ad could go out to? And finally, we want to identify how the appeals are being used: ethos, pathos, logos, and kairos. So for each of the following ads, pause the video and try and identify these levels of detail in how this ad is being constructed to appeal to a specific community and how effectively they're doing that. Go ahead and pause the video so that you can analyze this image. Once you've analyzed the image, we can talk about some examples here. We could say that a target audience's age might be anyone over the age of 16, as those are people with driver's license. You could also argue that it's anyone over the age of 21, as that's the legal drinking age, and in order to drink and drive legally, then you would have to be 21. The next thing we could say that it appeals to both genders, although maybe a little bit more to the masculine gender in this case, because we do see that it's a masculine figure highlighted here, and there's a masculine fist coming into his face. We could also look at political leanings. There's not really any here. Sometimes a category can have that NA, that non-applicable aspect to it. We could say that there's a little bit religion in here, as we're making a reference to morality. A good person doesn't want to cause harm. A good person doesn't want to kill anybody else. A good person doesn't want to crash their car into an innocent family, right? So there is an aspect of morality that you want to make good choices that affect your life in positive ways as opposed to harming others. This would be a lay audience, as it's a general audience. We could also look at the context for this. Perhaps it could appear in a newspaper. Perhaps it's a web ad. Perhaps it's a billboard up by the side of the road. There are a lot of ways that this information could be conveyed through context. We could also say that there's ethos. We have the Ecovia logo down here in the bottom. This is a logo, and so that creates ethos. We could also say that there's pathos. We feel empathy for the person being punched in the face. Nobody really enjoys that, so we can feel empathy for pain. Logos, we could say that this has a logical cause and effect reaction. If you drink, you may cause violence that will hurt people, and so we want to avoid that link in the logical causal chain. And finally, kairos. This is a timely ad as we move into summer. We move into graduation season. People want to celebrate and enjoy a cold one, so we want to make sure people are making responsible choices as they do that. Conduct this analysis for the following image. Pause as needed.